In Greek mythology, Iphigenia was the daughter of King Agamemnon and Queen Clytemnestra, and thus Princess of Argos. After offending Artemis, Agamemnon was commanded to kill Iphigenia as a sacrifice to allow his ships to sail to Troy. In some versions, Iphigenia is sacrificed at Aulis, but in others, she is rescued by Artemis. In the version where she is saved, she goes to the Taurians and meets her brother Orestes. Name: Iphigenia means strong-born, born to strength, or she who causes the birth of strong offspring. Iphigenia is the name of one of Agamemnon's 3 daughters in Homer's Iliad. The name Iphigenia may be simply an older variant of the name Iphigenia. Not all poets took Iphigenia and Iphigenia to be 2 names for the same heroine. Carini remarks, though it is certain that to begin with they served indifferently to address the same divine being, who had not belonged from all time to the family of Agamemnon. Mythology. In Greek mythology, Iphigenia appears as the Greek fleet gathers in Aulis to prepare for war against Troy. At Aulis, the leader of the Greeks, Agamemnon, accidentally killed a deer in a grove sacred to the goddess Artemis. She punished him by interfering with the wind so that his fleet could not sail to Troy. The seer cultures revealed that in order to appease Artemis, Agamemnon must sacrifice his eldest daughter, Iphigenia. Agamemnon at first refused, but, under pressure from the other commanders, eventually agreed. Iphigenia and her mother Clytemnestra were brought to Aulis under the pretext of a marriage to Achilles, but soon discovered that the marriage was a ruse. In some versions of the story, Iphigenia remains unaware of her imminent sacrifice until the last moment, believing that she is led to the altar to be married. In some versions, Iphigenia is not actually sacrificed. According to Hyginus's Fabulae, Iphigenia was not sacrificed. Some sources claim that Iphigenia was taken by Artemis to Taurus in Crimea on the moment of the sacrifice, and that the goddess left a deer or a goat in her place. The Hesiodic catalogue of women called her Iphigenia and told that Artemis transformed her into the goddess Hecate. Antoninus Liberalis said that Iphigenia was transported to the island of Leuce, where she was wedded to immortalized Achilles under the name of Aulis. In Aeschylus's Agamemnon, the first play in the Orestes, the sacrifice of Iphigenia is given as one of the reasons that Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus planned to murder Agamemnon. In Euripides' Iphigenia at Aulis, it is Menelaus who convinces Agamemnon to heed the seer Calchas's advice. After Agamemnon sends a message to Clytemnestra informing her of Iphigenia's supposed marriage, he immediately regrets his decision and tries to send another letter telling them not to come. Menelaus intercepts the letter and he and Agamemnon argue. Menelaus insists that it is Agamemnon's duty to do all he can to aid the Greeks. Clytemnestra arrives at Aulis with Iphigenia and the infant Orestes. Agamemnon tries to convince Clytemnestra to go back to Argos, but Clytemnestra insists on staying for the wedding. When she sees Achilles, Clytemnestra mentions the marriage. Achilles, however, appears to be unaware of it, and she and Iphigenia gradually learn the truth. Achilles, angry that Agamemnon has used him in his plot, vows to help prevent the murder of Iphigenia. Iphigenia and Clytemnestra plead with Agamemnon to spare his daughter's life. Achilles informs them that the Greek army, eager for war, has learned of the seer's advice and are demanding that Iphigenia be sacrificed. If Agamemnon refuses, it is likely they will turn on him and kill him and his family. Iphigenia, knowing she is doomed, makes the decision to be sacrificed willingly, reasoning that as a mere mortal, she can't go against the will of a goddess. She also believes that her death will be a heroic one, as it's for the good of all Greeks. Iphigenia exits, and the sacrifice takes place off-stage. Later, Clytemnestra is told of her daughter's death and how at the last moment Iphigenia was spared by the gods, who whisked her away and replaced her with a deer. Euripides' other play about Iphigenia, Iphigenia in Taurus, occurs after the sacrifice and after Orestes has killed Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. In order for Orestes to escape the persecutions of the Erinyes for killing his mother, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Orestes has been ordered by Apollo to go to Taurus. While in Taurus, Orestes is to carry off the Zoanon of Artemis which had fallen from heaven, and bring it to Athens. When Orestes arrives at Taurus with Pylades, son of Strophus and intimate friend of Orestes, the pair are at once captured by the Tauri, among whom the custom is to sacrifice all Greek strangers to Artemis. The priestess of Artemis is Iphigenia, and it is her duty to perform the sacrifice. Iphigenia and Orestes don't recognize each other. Iphigenia finds out from Orestes, who is still concealing his identity, that Orestes is alive. Iphigenia then offers to release Orestes if he will carry home a letter from her to Greece. Orestes refuses to go, but bids Pylades to take the letter while Orestes will stay to be slain. After a conflict of mutual affection, Pylades at last yields, but the letter brings about recognition between brother and sister, and all three escape together, carrying with them the image of Artemis. After the return to Greece, and having been saved from dangers by Athena, she orders Orestes to take the Zoanon to the town of Hali, where he is to build a temple for Artemis Tauropolis, at the annual festival to be held there in honor of Artemis. A single drop of blood must be drawn from the throat of a man to commemorate Orestes' near sacrifice. Iphigenia is sent by Athena to the sanctuary of Artemis in Brauron, where she is to be the priestess until she dies there. According to the Spartans, however, the image of Artemis was transported by them to Laconia, where the goddess was worshipped as Artemis or Thea. These close identifications of Iphigenia with Artemis have encouraged some scholars to believe that she was originally a hunting goddess whose cult was subsumed by the Olympian Artemis. Among the Taurians, the people of Taurus, Taurica facing the Euxine Sea, worshipped the maiden goddess Artemis. Some very early Greek sources in the epic cycle affirmed that Artemis rescued Iphigenia from the human sacrifice her father was about to perform. For instance, in the lost epic Cypria, which survives in a summary by Proclus, Artemis snatched her away and transported her to the Tauroi, making her immortal, and put a stag in place of the girl upon the altar. The goddess swept the young princess off to Taurus, where she became a priestess at the temple of Artemis. The earliest known accounts of the death of Iphigenia are included in Euripides' Iphigenia at Aulis and Iphigenia in Taurus, both Athenian tragedies of the 5th century BCE set in the heroic age. In the dramatist's version, the Taurians worshipped both Artemis and Iphigenia in the temple of Artemis at Taurus. Other variations of the death of Iphigenia include her being rescued at her sacrifice by Artemis and transformed into the goddess Hecate. Another example includes Iphigenia's brother Orestes discovering her identity and helping him steal an image of Artemis. Possible reasons for key discrepancies in the telling of the myth by playwrights such as Euripides is to make the story more palatable for audiences, and to allow sequels using the same characters. Many traditions arose from the sacrifice of Iphigenia. One prominent version is credited to the Spartans. Rather than sacrificing virgins, they would whip a male victim in front of a sacred image of Artemis. However, most tributes to Artemis inspired by the sacrifice were more traditional. Taurians have specially performed sacrifices of bulls and virgins in honor of Artemis. Among the Etruscans, the myth was retold in classical Greece and Italy, but it became most popular in Etruria, especially Persia. In the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE, the Etruscans adorned the cremation urns with scenes from the sacrifice. The most common scene, Iphigenia, a little girl, is held over the altar by Odysseus while Agamemnon performs the Eparchie. Clytemnestra stands beside Agamemnon and Achilles beside Odysseus, and each one begs for the life of Iphigenia. Quote, "This version is closest to the myth as the Romans told it." Adaptations of the Iphigenia story. Iphigenia at Aulis, play by Euripides. Iphigenia en Aulide, play by Jean Racine. Iphigenia en Aulide, opera by Christoph Willibald Gluck. Iphigenia, film by Michael Kakoyanis. The Songs of the Kings, novel by Barry Unsworth. Iphigenia, play by Misha Eliade. Iphigenia at Aulis, play by Ellen McLaughlin. Iphigenia, a rewrite of the play by Finianca. Iphigenia at Aulis, the first part of the Greek trilogy, adapted and directed by John Barton for the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1980. Iphigenia 2.0, modern adaptation of the play by Charles L. Me. IPH, adapted by Colin Tevan. Iphigenia in Taurus, play by Euripides. Iphigenia of Taurus, play by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Iphigenia en Tauride, opera by Christoph Willibald Gluck. Iphigenia at Taurus, play by Ellen McLaughlin. Metamorphoses, narrative poem by Ovid. Daughters of Atreus, play by Robert Turney. Iphigenia in Brooklyn, a solo cantata by Peter Schickler under the guise of P.D. Q. Bach. Iphigenia, ballet by Charles Lepic. Iphigenia, play by Samuel Costa. Iphigenia in Aurum, part of Bash. Latter-day Plays, a collection of 3 plays by Neil Labute. A Memory of Wind, story by Rachel Swirsky. Agamemnon's Daughter, novel by Ishmael Kader. Iphigenia at Aulis, a poem by Walter Savage Landor. A Fair Wind for Troy, novel by Doris Gates. In modern culture, The Atlantic speculates that Shireen Baratheon, a young girl from the TV series Game of Thrones who was sacrificed to a god by her father, was based on Iphigenia. The Slate similarly writes, every beat of the Greek myth is the same as Stannis' story. The troops are stuck and starving, and the general, Agamemnon, must sacrifice his own daughter to turn the fates to the favor, the mother begging for mercy, the disapproving second-in-command who can do nothing to stop it, the daughter who says she will do whatever it takes to help. It's all a clear echo. In Sacrifice, the second volume of Eric Shanoa's Age of Bronze comic book series, the substitution of a deer for Iphigenia is a bias lie invented by Odysseus to comfort the grieving Clytemnestra. However, it does not work, and Clytemnestra angrily curses the whole Achaean army, wishing they all die in the war. Sherry S. Tepper's The Gate to Women's Country contains a similar idea, with the play named Iphigenia ad Ilium running through the novel as a leitmotif. Within the novel, the ghost of Iphigenia tells Achilles that all the poets lied. Iphigenia says that she did not die willingly, nor was a hind sent to take her place. Iphigenia also realizes that these myths no longer have any power over her. Achilles then attempts to claim her as his wife, but she reminds him that women are no good to you dead. In Glyn Illifer's Gates of Troy, Iphigenia is in fact the daughter of Eperitus, a friend and bodyguard of Odysseus, who slept with Clytemnestra during the courtship of Helen. There is also speculation that Iphigenia was actually the daughter of Helen and Theseus. In Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles, Iphigenia comes to Aulis under the belief that she is to marry Achilles. Instead, she is unwillingly sacrificed to appease Artemis. The full name of the fictional private investigator V.I. Warshawski, created by Sarah Paretsky, is Victoria Iphigenia Warshawski. In the 1985 novel Killing Orders, third in the series, the protagonist identifies herself with the character of Greek myth, and recognizes a traumatic event of her childhood with the act of Iphigenia's sacrifice.